You're listening to Beast Over Burden, powered by Barbell Logic.
We're Nikki and Andrew, your personal professional coaches.
We help you take control of your fitness through hard but doable training and nutrition practices that fit your busy life.
Build a stronger, healthier version of yourself with lifelong habits. Hello, welcome to Beast Over Burden, powered by Barbell Logic. I'm your host here, Nikki Sims, CXO of Barbell Logic, and with me is Andrew Jackson, COO.
Oh, hello again.
Hello. And we have a guest with us today. First guest of the series of the new year, I think. We have Marcus Cain, who I met through his podcast, actually, called Strong Not Starving. And you, Marcus, are so fitting to have a conversation with as we just concluded our Physical Freedom Through Nutrition series. And I think everything we talked about just kind of culminates in how you help people through your own coaching practice. So welcome to the show, Marcus.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah. So I'd love to start with a little bit about what you do, and then I'm just going to pry to figure out how you got there.
Sure. Essentially, I help people with difficult problems when it comes to food. When the garden variety advice that we might get, eat enough protein, get enough fiber, get enough sleep, and, all these habits around food and everything. When we know what we want to do, but struggle to bridge that gap between knowing and action, that's where I come in.
Yeah. You just said like one or two sentences right there, and instantly I can remember all of the emotions that I have throughout the day around food and measurements and where it's like, yes, I know I'm supposed to eat this, but this is how I feel when I'm trying to do it.
Yep, absolutely.
And it sounds like you guide those conversations and help people make those choices.
100%. And that's exactly what's going on with food, right? We'd love to be totally logical creatures, but we do have a subconscious, we do have feeling, we do have emotions. And the way that I kind of describe this to people is like, this is going to sound weird for a moment, but we all think of ourselves as this single entity. You're like, I am this single thing, where really, I just come on an experiment with me for a second and think of yourself as a horse and a horse rider, where the horse represents your physical body, your subconscious mind, and the rider represents your conscious mind. Now, if you look at the way a horse rider, like a really great one, manages a horse, at no point is that horse rider able to muscle the horse into doing something. The horse rider will never, ever be able to overpower the horse. And a lot of us with food, we're trying to overpower our horse. We're trying to bully ourselves into doing things. We're trying to sweep feeling and psychology and everything like that under the rug, when really, if you look at like an absolutely great horse rider, they give the illusion of control with the horse, not because they are actually in control of the horse, but because they know how to communicate and relate with the horse. So if we can navigate our own relationship with our body, our own relationship with our mind, we will have much more autonomy when it comes to food choices if we approach that like a partnership, like a democracy, rather than coming at ourselves like a dictator.
You said that most of the clients you work with are clear on what they want, and we talked about that in our series. When you say that, are they, I want to eat a certain amount of protein and fiber like you were talking about, or is it that they want a certain physical result or change in their body or some combination? What do you typically hear people saying they want when they work with you?
I work with a lot of people who've had very stressful, very high maintenance, very difficult situations with food. A lot of people come to me and say, look, I just want peace. I just want what I've been going through with food to be over. And I would like to be able to do that while keeping some semblance of attachment to my values in terms of being fit, being healthy, all this kind of stuff. Because there's obviously, there's some really polarizing information out there surrounding nutrition and that whole thing. But people usually come to me and say, look, I want to be able to eat in a way that makes me feel good physically, that's in alignment with my values and maybe some aspirations. And can I do that peacefully?
Yeah.
My answer is usually like, yes, with the right work.
So funny you mentioned that, because I was just this morning was listening to an interview between Tom Papa and Jim Gaffigan. I don't know, the two comedians, totally random, but it'll connect in the end. And they were talking about Ozempic. And Jim Gaffigan was saying, eventually, I think barring some unforeseen downside consequence of this, I think it'll just become normal, because, and he rattled off all the benefits that he had mentioned. And then he said, it's really just effectively brought me peace. And Tom Papa's question back to him was, oh, so is it like you're not thinking about food all the time? Like you're just like, and they were both kind of connected to this idea and this feeling of like, you're always thinking about food. And Gaffigan's response was, well, that hasn't really changed. But now when I sit down to eat, I eat the way I describe it, as like a human, instead of like I used to eat like a dog. Like I would just
brutal. Yeah.
He just creates that image of, just like eating all this food. But yeah, the mental piece. I mean, we've talked about that with one of our former nutrition directors too, that one of the biggest differences with coaching and making changes on the strength side versus nutrition is the number of decisions that have to be made.
Yes.
Like strength training, sets, reps, exercise, rest time. Maybe it's a half a dozen decisions and variables that you get to kind of logically and make you feel like you're making rational mathematical decisions. Whereas nutrition, I wouldn't even know, thousands a day, hundreds at least a day, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a process for helping people reach that piece, or like how do you start that process where you've got hundreds of decisions and now you need to start making incremental, like we talk about, minimum effective dose changes?
We start by eliminating unlikely solutions. And I say unlikely because I have to be a little bit diplomatic here, because no matter how crazy or limited a diet might be, there's going to be one guy out there that's like, this worked great for me. So I'm being very diplomatic in saying, like, statistically speaking, some approaches are more likely to give us lasting positive outcomes than others. And that's where I start with people going, okay, like no judgment here, but like statistically speaking, an approach that is overly restrictive, for example, that eliminates entire food groups or completely takes away your autonomy in regards to certain things, very exciting short-term results. And it can really play on that desire to make things simple, right? All of a sudden, you can only eat 3 foods. Oh my goodness. Like, how simple does life feel all of a sudden? But that is very, very short-lived. Like, the honeymoon period on that is very, very short. Unless, and there are always exceptions, like someone on the autism end of like neurodivergence or something like that, they'll be like 3 foods forever, love it. And that's not everyone on that end of the spectrum, but I could go down that rabbit hole for a long time. But there are always going to be exceptions. But first we want to look at, let's eliminate some false solutions. And a lot of those false solutions out there right now are ones that do exactly what you described. Like, they attempt to make the nutrition situation more simple for you by just limiting your options. And on the front end, that can seem really appealing, but it has a very short honeymoon period.
And it doesn't seem to teach you how to think about food. It just teaches you to say no.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Then from there, we look at everything that feels complicated now. Again, like, entertain this idea that everything with nutrition that feels complicated right now is skill-based. It might feel like it's involving your thoughts and feelings and decisions and everything like that. But imagine, just like you can get really good at strength training and understanding like maximum and minimum effective volume and all this kind of stuff, and how you can understand training like the back of your hand, to the point where something that did used to feel complicated now just feels very intuitive. The answer to simplifying the situation with nutrition is to understand that with practice, you will get really good at it. And what was complicated or what did feel complicated won't feel complicated anymore. Anything worth doing feels complicated on the front end. But with nutrition, it's like we feel for some reason that, oh, this will never change and this is this impossible thing that I just can't navigate. It's not true. It's skills.
Remember we had one conversation ages ago about, we have levels of progression in lifting, novice, intermediate, advanced. And someone once asked, well, what do you think that is for nutrition? And I think the way you describe that is how I would describe someone who's advanced in their nutrition is being able to understand what choices they have, understand the trade-offs, and make them without feeling guilt and stress and shame to such an extent that they might have before.
Yeah, that actually was going to be my question, was a version of that. Do you have a mental model of what that, in Nikki's words, advanced skill level looks like that you are coaching people towards? Or is it kind of an individual journey for each person?
Everyone is a bit unique, but broadly speaking, the advanced version of this would be not the absence of difficult feelings, but a very well-established ability to navigate difficult feelings. So rather than think, okay, is there a way that I can eat, or is there something I can do that will take these difficult feelings away? Well, the answer is like, no.
Dang it.
We usually run into problems. When you think of coping strategies that just numb or distract from or remove difficult feelings off the table, they're usually avoidant coping strategies. They don't go anywhere good. We're talking like leaning on food way too much for emotional regulation. We're talking about alcohol. We're talking about gambling. We're talking about like any kind of avoidant coping strategy that aims to numb or distract from what we're feeling. The advanced nutrition stuff is about recognizing whatever I'm feeling and how I relate to my own thoughts and my own internal environment. That's part of the human condition. Being advanced with nutrition is being very, very confident in how we're navigating that space, how we're responding to difficult thoughts and feelings, not the absence of them.
This gets deep real quick.
Tell me about it.
Man, yeah, letting that marinate. It's really
We're not
good.
talking about protein, carbohydrates, and fat right now. We're like, you're going elephant in the rider or horseback in the rider. I'd heard that as elephant
Horse
in the
riding
rider.
an elephant.
Yeah, the elephant in the rider. Yeah, that's
same idea. Just huge, animal that you can't control, and then this little guy on top that is your conscious brain. But I mean, it's way more psychology than most RDs or nutrition experts that I'm aware of come out of more of like a nutrition science background. And then it's like, you got to figure out the psychology part on the back end, but you're just going head on to, it seems like, psychology, even more than nutrition science.
Head on very much into resilience and window of tolerance work and that kind of stuff. Like, I'm not a psychologist. I do work in conjunction with therapists sometimes. Like, when someone has a set of feelings essentially that are too big for them to be able to face without some kind of coping strategy or something, and say someone comes to me and they're engaged in a whole bunch of disordered eating or something, and it turns out that is in one way or another a buffer between them and these really big difficult feelings that they don't know how to regulate without the buffer of their current relationship with food. That's kind of therapy territory. But I meet a lot of people after therapy.
Okay.
When people are in a place where they're like, okay, I can face some difficult thoughts and feelings without going into panic. It's really, really hard, but I'm not going to, physically and emotionally shut down. Like, we can go there, we can do that work. That's when I start this kind of like awareness and window of tolerance work and everything. And again, they balancing the values and what you actually want to get out of the journey, because we need to be motivated to do it, because it's It's like, unless we're doing this in the name of something that you really, really want, and unless it feels somewhat like inspiring to do in the moment, and unless it's rewarding in the moment to some degree, then it's going to be hard. So we're balancing a lot of variables here.
Can you explain window of tolerance?
So imagine like a buffer zone. Growing our window of tolerance means that we might have a difficult set of feelings. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm probably one of the most anti-confrontational people on the planet when it comes to my marriage. I see some couples just willing to kind of like argue with each other and kind of like get into it with each other and everything like that. I'm not like that. I'm too far in the opposite direction, where I will avoid conflict to the point where it's not a good thing, and I'll sweep things under the rug and I'll repress and I'll like deny. I'll be like, no, it's fine, until it starts to get at me from the inside. So my window of tolerance for conflict, I've had to work on that, and work on being able to exist with a certain degree of discomfort that comes with a healthy amount of conflict, in the name of being able to actually have conversations that need to be had, rather than just having no window of tolerance for conflict and being totally avoidant and just sweeping things under the rug. So when we say window of tolerance in terms of emotion with food, at what point, like say, for example, someone who eats as a way to emotionally regulate, at what point does the food come into that equation? Like, how emotionally dysregulated does someone need to be for them to go, I can't deal with this anymore. I need an out. I need something here. And that's where that window of tolerance is, working on that buffer zone so that we buy ourselves time for these big feelings and emotions to pass a bit more organically, rather than trying to interfere with them or make them go away.
And can those feelings, those, like when you say discomfort, I immediately go to pain, but a lot of times the moments where I feel like I need that buffer time are when I'm really excited. I'm actually in a really good mood, and I'm like, let's go have fun. And it's, food and drink is like a celebration thing.
Yeah.
I suppose I could see how the moment of discomfort would be choosing not to indulge in that moment. Or is that a moment of discomfort, or is it different when it's something where you're like celebrating or whatever? It's like a moment of happiness that you might be eating or drinking the thing that isn't probably helping me get towards my goal.
In that moment of celebration, like when you're having a good time, no doubt you reflect a fair bit. Are you aware of a point at which you hit diminishing returns with the things that you're doing in that moment, like the number of drinks, the quantity of food? Are you aware of a point at which you're no longer increasing the amount of good times you're having by consuming more?
I become aware of when you're at that point.
Well, I mean, it's I think that in hindsight, yes.
Okay.
And often in the moment, I might not be, pizza might be another one that a lot of our listeners could relate to, or at least a lot of my clients have talked to me about situations where there's something about pizza where it's just like, there's no such thing as just having one slice over the course of 30 minutes. It's like, if I sit down, or if my clients sit down to a pizza, it's 5 slices or 6 slices or the entire pizza or nothing,
But no bites taste as good as like the first 2 bites.
No, yeah. Some people it might be ice cream. If we're gonna start poking fingers.
Whoa. Okay. I don't know what I'm poking into the middle of here.
Well, interestingly, my strategy for pizza is to have 2 different kinds of pizza that complement each other, because then you just go back and forth.
Oh, wow.
I guess what I would say, the common thread to answer your question directly is, it's usually only in hindsight where I'm like, oh, there was this moment where it was diminishing returns. If I had just stopped there, it would have been better.
There are several different paths that we can take with something like this, and it's very like kind of unique to the individual. But one example that I can give here, or a very broad kind of dissection of the mechanism or what might be happening here. When we decide to have a good time, it's essentially, it might be a form of relief for whatever stress or pressures that we're just living with on a daily basis. So we enter this phase, this moment in time where we're like, oh, I get to put all those things aside and just eat the pizza right now because pizza is delicious. Even bad pizza is good. That's how good pizza is. And we're like, all right, I'm having my moment now. This is my moment when all my stress, all my pressure, everything gets put aside. And so we start to sometimes dissociate in that moment. We, rather than kind of keep one foot on the ground and staying connected with our body and everything like that, we allow that disconnect. We allow ourselves to just kind of get swept up in it and disconnect from what I can only call mindful presence. And I know that doesn't sound a whole lot of fun. I'm going to have a mindfully present evening with my friends. That's like, bear with me for a moment. But what I'm getting at here is when we disconnect like that, we start to lose touch with where is this point of diminishing returns where what was fun is now becoming less fun. And if we keep that connection with ourselves, with our body, with how we're feeling, there is also a point of discomfort that we can find when we realize that we're at that point of diminishing returns and it's maybe time to stop. And that can be really, really uncomfortable, realizing that...
I feel sad.
Yeah, sad. People have described that moment to me like a sense of loss, a sense of grief.
Lose their freedom.
Going like, yeah, it's like, okay, I'm realizing that I've had enough here. And it's time to start winding it up. That particular brand of discomfort will appear at that moment that we need a window of tolerance for to be able to respond to, in the name of being able to feel good about the evening we had or the time we had, like in a few hours' time or the next day. And this can pan out in so many different ways. And there are so many things that can affect the level of discomfort that comes up at that point where we realize, okay, it's time for me to call it a day. For example, if someone's being intensely restrictive with their diet, that point where they try and stop is going to feel horrific.
Yeah.
And this is like one of the reasons why we need to look at habituation with different foods and creating a level of food freedom and a level with peace with food and a level of just feeling like, all right, no food is a real big deal. Everything's fine. Otherwise, we reach that point where we're like, okay, I need to wind this up. I need to stop because I'm not feeling great anymore. But part of me knows that I'm going to not give myself anything fun to eat for like 8 weeks. Try and stop. Just try. Try and stop under those circumstances. It's rough. So there is the combination of the distress tolerance plus what we're doing in our general life that sets us up for how much distress we experience in that moment. And again, we're balancing all these variables.
And that's like what you've spoken about, Andrew, where you have to hone the skill of acknowledging this isn't what I want right now, but it's what I know that I want. Or as you say, Marcus, in the name of like, this is what I know that I want in 2 months. And that makes me feel good and at peace with this decision.
Yeah, we talked a lot about playing with the time horizon, both in terms of allowing more time in the moment or playing with, or mentally kind of playing with either pulling the positive feelings from the future into the present, be in touch with that, or to pull the pain into the present and, be in touch with, well, if I make this decision now, there is going to be potentially some consequence because I might not in the moment be able to feel, or I don't feel either the positive or the negative side of the decision. But if I can expand my time horizon mentally, or, it's just kind of using imagination, really, trying to imagine how am I going to feel if I continue down this path or not. Those are just the small kind of mental exercises I try to do when I can catch myself in the moment. But like everything with especially emotions and the subconscious mind, the crux of it seems to be recognizing that I'm at that point. Because most of the time I'm just going to blow right through, and this is something my daughter laughs at me a lot about, that, I'm like 46 years old and figuring things out that she's known her whole life. But, that most of my life I've spent just reacting to whatever I'm feeling in the moment and not consciously recognizing that I might just be in a bad mood, or I might be tired, or who knows. I'm just doing and just going. So that it's one of the things I notice with myself and then with my clients as well. Like, recognizing that you're at that moment of choice is, with food, really tough, because it's just exhausting to feel like you got to be, what did you call it? Like grounded and connected when you're making those hundreds of decisions, and then throw into the equation, a lot of our clients are with their family or with their friends or with their coworkers. So it's not just them sitting down with, their pantry and their home refrigerator. They're at a restaurant or at a party,
Yeah.
So not only are you having to step back and actually stay connected with yourself, but you're making these decisions that have that social component to it as well. It seems like that's really tough to do.
At the start, it will feel like that takes up a bit of mental real estate to make that happen. But how it starts is not how it finishes. Like, your experience of doing this, as you kind of get a hold of the practice and start reshaping some of these things in terms of how connected you might be to your body, how grounded you might be through these different experiences, it takes up less and less mental real estate as we practice. Like I mentioned, it's kind of like a skill. Like, and I don't want to kind of be shy about this, because it might be important for people to know for context. Like, I'm saying this not from the position of being some holier than thou dude who's always had things with food nailed. Like, I went through 15 really bad years with food and body image and all this kind of stuff where I felt completely out of control. I'd be sitting, like, really rough moments. Like, I'd be sitting outside a 7-Eleven in my car eating like $50 worth of just crap, in almost just tears of frustration. Like, why am I doing this again? Why?
Wow.
And despite the fact that no part of me wanted to do that, like, I mean, it's obviously there was a part of me that wanted to do it, but I knew that I was going to feel bad. I knew that that's not where I wanted to be. And at that point in time, trying to develop skills in this area felt like riding a unicycle. All it took as I was trying to kind of navigate out of this space would be like a couple of drinks and kind of a bad day, and all of a sudden I'd just be like buried in chips and ice cream and whatever else. But now these days it's like, I can go out to dinner, I can have a few drinks, I can be with friends, I can be whatever. And it's just like, there is a well-practiced part of my brain that's just like, don't worry, I got this. It's just kind of ticking over, keeping an eye on things, staying connected with myself and what's going on. And it took, I'm not going to lie, like, that took work, but I wouldn't trade it for anything, because it's freedom. It's the ability to walk into any food environment, anywhere, and be fine.
It sounds like you really had to learn how to trust yourself.
Trust is an interesting word. I think, like, trust comes through practice, like,
Yep.
I've seen your lifts. You're like strong, like, you're good. It's not like you walk up to the bar going, oh, I trust myself to do this. It's like, no, I've practiced this,
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I was thinking, to do what you do and to describe it as you have to be someone with empathy and truly be able to relate to these moments that people are experiencing.
Yeah.
Or else it would be difficult, I imagine, to work with you if I was just like, you've never felt these feelings before. You have no idea what I'm going through.
Yeah. I get I get a lot of people who come to me having been to maybe other coaches or counselors or therapists or whatever, and nothing against those modalities. Like, I'm a coach, but I get people coming to me who is like, my therapist doesn't get this. My therapist doesn't understand. And often I'll work with people who are like, they'll see a therapist and myself. And I don't step outside. I'm not like trying to be a pretend therapist here. That's not my job. I draw very clear boundaries with what is coaching and what isn't coaching and what is therapy and what isn't therapy. I think a lot of coaches are screwing that up royally and really doing everyone a disservice, especially wellness and nutrition coaches. So I put a lot of emphasis on being a coach, not a pretend therapist. So a lot of people come to me and say, look, I talk to my therapist about a lot of things. They're very helpful. They're great, but they just don't understand this. And they'll talk to me about that.
Is it possible to, if we wanted to leave the audience with like an example of, you mentioned skill building, is there sort of like a simple or get a starter pack? We talk about the novice linear progression in strength training. Is there like a novice, the equivalent of like, here's the squat for nutrition, or just, I mean, a lot of it's coming down to behavior change that somebody could try. That would be an example. Either, our common ones, like you said at the beginning, a lot of people want to eat more protein or more fiber, which is kind of the flip of what we were talking about earlier. Yes, a lot of people need to lay off the pizza or figure out how to manage the portion size, but a lot of them are also like, how do I get more fiber into my diet? So when you're talking about an audience that's trying to usually build muscle and lose body fat, what might be a novice level behavior change thing that they could try?
For sure. You've actually touched on it a couple of times already. Like, the first thing is noticing in real time what's going on. Like, that is the thing, to notice our own patterns non-judgmentally. The practice of non-judgment is so important here, because if you're understanding yourself and noticing what's going on, but at the same time you're giving yourself a lot of negative self-talk and a lot of inner critic type stuff, and it's causing emotional dysregulation, that's not, objectively speaking, in terms of positive outcomes, not a good place to be. It's not going to lead anywhere good. So the active practice of non-judgment, while noticing and observing our own patterns and when things come up for us, that's kind of the most important first step. Because if we don't have that, and I might ask, okay, so this week, what happened around there? And you're like, I don't know. Like, okay, well, we need to know. We need to stay a little bit grounded. We need to be able to observe what's going on. The barrier to that for most people is that it feels uncomfortable to do that. And that kind of leads into the second step of looking at when you start to experience some kind of distress. And, this is work that I do with people over a long period of time. So I'm giving you like the executive summary of a couple of things to just experiment with and explore the territory. So the first thing is to notice what's going on non-judgmentally.
Which the non-judgment, I would imagine, is super critical, because when you start this, most of the time, if not all the time, you've crossed the Rubicon by the time you notice. Meaning, like, the thing happened. Oops, now I just notice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you have, which there's likely going to be some guilt present, which is going to kick off the judgment right out of the gate. So you have to be like ready. If we're going to start trying to notice, get ready to bring in
that's it. Yeah.
the inner roommate, like right out of the gate.
That's really hard to do because you have to remove some words from your vocabulary. You have to remove good and bad. And when you've worked around food for so long, you hear this food is good, this food is bad.
Should and shouldn't.
This quantity is good, this quantity is bad. And when you try to describe around that without being able to use those words. You have to come up with a whole new vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, this made me feel good. This didn't lead to me feeling good, and all this kind of stuff. Like, what was the experience? And when we look at where to kind of go from there, and with non-judgment as well, it's like non-judgment doesn't mean the absence. And this is a real, like, head baker. Like, this idea that the practice of non-judgment doesn't mean the absence of guilt or shame or something else. It means not judging yourself for a part of you experiencing those feelings. It's like being able to notice, this feeling is kind of running through a part of me right now. Yeah, it makes sense. I might be giving myself a bit of a hard time about that, but I'm all right. It's that being able to show up for yourself like the best older sibling you could ever imagine. Like, imagine the kind of older sibling or older friend or even parent that you wanted, like, when you were younger. The kind of person that shows up and going, yeah, okay, cool. That wasn't ideal. But what led to that? What can we learn from it? Like, being a little bit more like that with ourselves, relating to ourselves in that way as an active practice. It won't come naturally. Practicing relating to ourselves in that way, in a non-judgmental way, in an unconditional positive regard type way, creating the kind of relationship with ourselves that is congruent with a different emotional experience and in turn different outcomes. But then from there, we look at if we are spiraling or if, difficult emotions or difficult feelings start to build, where are we shining the spotlight of our attention? Are we allowing the spotlight of our attention to be with a storm of spiraling thoughts that just become wrapped up in cognitive distortions and catastrophizing and all kinds of stuff? Or are we able to take the spotlight of our attention in those moments into the visceral experience of being in the body, any discomfort we might be feeling, the felt, like the physical experience of the difficult emotion? And can we build a tolerance for that? Like, you might grind through a few reps or something like that. Training is uncomfortable. So it's not like anyone listening to this is unfamiliar with the idea of physical discomfort. Feeling difficult feelings is physical discomfort. If we recognize the visceral experience of the feeling and be with that and move through that, rather than get lost in those peak emotional moments in thought spirals that are simply going to exacerbate the difficult experience.
Yeah,
So
I feel like you just described my Thursday last week.
I'm so sorry. That sounds rough.
Yeah, no, it's great. Like, it totally happens that way where it really is something happens and you can go down a spiral and it's really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, it sucks. It really sucks.
You described a concept at the beginning that seems like that matches up with what you just described, that seeing yourself as not being this monolithic thing, and that by allowing yourself to be not that, you can, I think, remove some of that judgment, because you're this part of me over here experiencing that, or at least it helps me mentally be more flexible with reacting to myself, because I don't have to be like, I am this, I am that. It's more like, well, that part of me is just feeling this way right now.
Nailed it.
I don't know. Those mental constructs kind of give me it feels like it gives me a tool to not feel stuck in that moment. Because I think that's kind of another interesting challenges that I hear from a lot of people, is that once the mind feels that discomfort, and this might be that catastrophizing you're talking about, it's like, oh, this is the way it's going to be forever now, unless I start doing something. And so then you start like reaching out for the thing that's going to like stop it, because if I don't stop it, I'm going to be here forever.
I love everything you said just then so much, because trying to stop it at that point is like trying to flatten out waves in water using your hand. The more you interfere with it, the worse it's going to get. And one of the reasons why we a really common tactic that's taught everywhere is just notice and name feelings. Like, I notice that this feeling is moving through me, or a part of me is feeling this, putting a name to it. It immediately puts a buffer in between you and the emotion, because one of the most unhelpful things that we can do is start identifying as the emotion, or identifying the emotion as part of who we are or something like that. I am sad, I am whatever. And we don't want to gaslight ourselves and repress. We don't want to be like, I'm not feeling anything, I'm totally fine, because that works against us in a different way. But if we can recognize that we are not our emotional experience, we are having an emotional experience in the way that water has ripples on it, in the way that, the atmosphere experiences different weather. It is not this state of permanence. And I love what you said just then. There is this trap in that moment where it's like part of our mind goes, oh my God, this is going to be me forever unless I do something about it. And most of the time we're like, no, that moment in time is when you really need to not do things about it. Like,
Yeah.
give it a moment.
That's helpful to remember that too, is you don't have to change everything right now. Let yourself feel what you're feeling, name it, and then see what happens in the next, 90 seconds, because it's kind of alarming how quickly you can get out of an emotion.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, wait, why did I get over that so quickly? It was so huge. What do I do now? I had a bunch of things that I thought I was meant to do, and now do I not do any of them? Yeah.
I find it helpful to just remember, whenever I've ever felt like I really urgently needed to say something that was really important, and damn it, I'm going to say this because it needs to be said right now. When have I ever not regretted that decision? Like, urgency is not your friend.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we talked about that before. Like, whenever you feel righteous, that is not the time to be speaking.
Funny enough, that's where I heard the writer in the elephant was the righteous mind.
Oh,
That
right.
was from Jonathan Haidt. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. That was actually also the same one where my daughter was like, what? Really, Dad? You just figuring this out? Because I lived most of my life thinking I am going to immediately react to that, and I'm going to say it, and I'm going to be loud and obnoxious about it. That's going to solve a whole lot of problems. Actually, no.
Well, it's like, we could unpack a whole lot of social conditioning there and everything like that. Like,
Yep.
because what, I don't know about you guys, but I was raised by boomers. So,
Yeah.
We're cleaning house of their stuff.
Yep. Yep. Always felt like I was responsible for something. Needed to have the answers right then. Yep. Well, Marcus, I know you are really wonderful at turning what you do into actionable material, because I follow you.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
where can people learn more about you, and where can people find you?
If you start at strongnot starving.com, you'll be able to find your way to the Strong Not Starving podcast and Strong Not Starving Instagram page. It's all there. There's no difference in the name across all the platforms. And on the strongnotStarving.com website right now, there's a free download that I've got available that's like a 12-page guide. I got carried away on just like life without dieting. If
Oh, yes.
being able to navigate that space, like, okay, I don't want to be on a diet, I don't want that stress, but how do I make that work without it just being chaos? Like, so, I've got a download on that that's free, available at the moment, and a billion episodes of the Strong Not Starving podcast. If you want to dive into all different things, we got everything from like boundary setting to an episode coming up on taking opposite action and what that means in different circumstances, and a ton on things like regulating through difficult moments with food and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we really go on some deep dives.
I highly recommend. Check out Marcus's content. Everyone's really good.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Andrew, any last questions?
No, we really should cut me off because I feel like we could talk forever. This is super
I would
interesting.
like that.
I feel like I'm having a therapy session here. I'm questioning.
And every time I talk to Marcus, I'm like, let's get an ebook going. Let's get all this going.
Constructing my fabric of reality. It's all good,
Oh, I would love to unpack all of that with you guys, like anytime. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really bad at small talk. I love like conversations. So just, I'm here. You know where to find me.
Yep. I see that coming.
I appreciate it. It was an awesome conversation.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. Please go check out Marcus on Strong Not Starving. And if you got some value out of this, we'd love a share and we'd love a review. And we will be back with you next week.